and welcome to the Kink Perspective. My name is Chris. I'm a psychotherapist and consultant. On today's show, I'm going to be revisiting a theme I explored way back in the beginning of the show, episode 37. Back then, I was talking about rejection resiliency. That episode was about how we respond when things don't go our way and when someone says no, or even when the connection ends. But today, I want to go a little bit deeper, especially into one specific expression of that, ghosting, because it's a topic that comes up a lot. I've kind of written on the other side of that. I know today, I'm going to be honest, it's probably going to ruffle some feathers, but that's okay. This is about having a solid discourse on the things that we experience in relationships, the lifestyle, or even in the vanilla world, and how we need to really frame that for ourselves. Now, ghosting, it's really a word that gets tossed around a lot. And lately, I've noticed it in a lot more conversations about how, quote unquote, harmful it is, how ghosting is treated as betrayal or abandonment or even worse, emotional abuse. But I think we need to pause and ask ourselves here, is every disappearance an injury? Or have we lost something in how we understand autonomy and discomfort and rejection? So before we jump into all of this, I want to thank everyone who's been listening and growing in this space with me. Whether you're new or returning, your questions and your challenges help shape how this show works and what it's becoming. And I want to give a quick shout out to the listener from Milan, Italy, who really nudged this conversation forward for me. I did get your message. It got me thinking. So today, this is in part for you. So I hope it does help. My Italian sucks, so I'm not going to say hello in Italian, but no, I'm thinking about you. Also, if you'd like to support the podcast, there is a link in the show's description to donate or share the show with someone who might need to hear it. All right, let's get into it. Ghosting, rejection, emotional closure. These are topics we've turned into moral debates. Was it cruel? Was it fair? Should they have said goodbye? But today I want to shift the lens a little bit. I want to talk about autonomy, about resilience, and about why the absence of closure isn't always a wrong that's done to us. Sometimes it's just life. It's messy, it's painful, but it's still survivable. And sometimes the expectations for answers becomes its own form of control dressed up as justice. So let's unpack the difference between harm and hurt, between being left and being wronged, and why learning to carry rejection, well, might just be one of the most important overlooked skills in our community, if not in our lives, right? Because we deal with rejection constantly inside of the community when you are in your negotiations and your ongoing negotiations. One person likes one thing, they don't like something else, so it's a subtle form of rejection, but we don't view that as harm, right? All right. So I want to start by being clear about what we're even talking about first, because I want to kind of get into this modern collapse of rejection resilience. Ghosting is when someone exits a relationship, sexual, romantic, even a friendship, without any warning or explanation. They just stop responding, they vanish. That silence can feel brutal. I'm not saying it doesn't, especially if there was some sort of emotional vulnerability or intimacy involved, and it feels abrupt. Sometimes it even feels maybe violent, not because someone laid their hands on us, but because it was unexpected in the continuity that we shared, and that was suddenly taken away. Now, rejection resiliency, on the other hand, is our ability to absorb that experience, to take the hit of emotional disappointment, even confusion, without assigning ourselves or the other person a moral failing. That doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. Of course it does. But resiliency means being able to feel the loss, acknowledge the void, and still get up and carry on. It's not about pretending you're fine. It's about knowing you'll survive it without needing to rewrite it as cruelty to make sense of the pain. Now, what I am noticing, and maybe some of you are as well, and definitely the person who reached out to me, is that culturally we're losing that skill. Emotional discomfort is now often labeled as emotional harm, If someone makes us feel unseen, if they leave without a goodbye, if the response isn't grief, it's accusation. The story becomes, they ghosted me, therefore that's an unsafe person. I've been abused, I've been wronged, I want justice. Well, that logic is seductive, especially when you're hurting, but it's dangerous because not all pain is harm. Not all endings are betrayals, and not every exit, especially if they're silent, is a red flag. Sometimes people disappear because they're avoidant, because they're scared, because they don't know how to communicate, or because simply they change their mind and they don't want to explain themselves. And maybe that's frustrating. Maybe it's cowardly, but it's not always malicious. And as a matter of fact, I recently even read something from a very popular, very intelligent person on social media that is in a position to actually understand this and turn themselves into the victim while they lamented their story about being quote unquote ghosted. They should know better. Doesn't matter who I'm talking about. They should have known better. And especially given their professional stance, the way they framed the conversation, I don't know all the context, but if I'm reading what they're saying, oh, they did all this to me, I was helping. Well, guess what? Sometimes we don't have the words why we're in pain. We don't have the words why we're going to leave. We just do. Because it feels safe, because it's what we know. Maybe it's a survival technique we learned early on in childhood that protects us, right? We are living in a time where personal discomfort is often externalized, where feeling bad must be, someone else made us feel that way. And that kind of thinking removes any space for internal reflection. Instead of asking, why does this hit me so hard? What part of me needed that goodbye? We're looking for the villain. And when we do that, we give away the very resilience we should be trying to build. And the truth is here, not everyone is emotionally equipped to give us what we want. Some people don't have the language. Some, they avoid conflict. Others don't want to deal with guilt or drama. Now, is it immature? Well, maybe. But is it abuse? No. Sometimes what feels like abandonment is just someone acting in line with their limitations. Now, it's not ideal, but that's, not a moral failure either. We have to stop pretending that a lack of closure is a form of harm. Closure's nice, and it's comforting. But honestly, it's not owed. In real life, not just in theory, people walk away every day. People stop showing up every day. People disappear every day. And when we treat every one of those exits as a betrayal, we train ourselves to stay stuck until someone else gives us the permission to move on. That's not resilience. That's emotional dependency masquerading as justice. So I want you to ask yourself this. When someone exits your life without explanation, are you responding with grief or with entitlement? Are you hurt because they left or because they didn't give you the kind of ending you wanted? That's where it gets uncomfortable. But that's also where resilience starts. Now, I really want to get, because, I started talking about this, and this is the thing that absolutely grabs me in these conversations, or grabs me when I get these questions or I see these discussions. I'm being harmed. Okay, so hurt versus harm, right? We understand this concept pretty much in the lifestyle or in life in general. Now, hurt versus harm when it comes to ghosting. Now, I want to make the distinction that a lot of people don't like hearing. Being hurt doesn't mean you've been harmed. Pain is part of the human experience. It shows up in every kind of ending. Slow fades, explosive arguments, breakups that drag out, or people that just vanishes. When someone ghosts, it absolutely can sting. It can feel maybe confusing, or you're jarred because it's sudden, it's maybe even humiliating. But that pain by itself doesn't always mean something harmful happened. It means you're human. You expected something, and you didn't get it. Now, harm implies something deeper, right? And I'm emphasizing this here because we need to understand. A lot of people seem not to understand the difference. That is intentional disregard, emotional manipulation, or coercion. Hurt just means something landed in a way you didn't want it to. And if we don't learn to separate the two, everything becomes abuse. Every disappointment becomes a red flag, and that's not just a problem socially, it's a problem psychologically. Some people aren't capable of giving closure. That might be because of anxiety, maybe shame, guilt, immaturity. Some people are just avoidant. Some know their words are going to end up making it worse. Some don't even have the words to say at all, right? Some don't understand the impact of silence. Now, I'm not saying this excuses it, but it does challenge the belief that if someone disappears, they've abused you. That belief strips away all the nuance and throws everyone who exits into the same bucket as the people who do real emotional damage. And here's where this whole need for closure comes in. There's this psychologist named Ari Krulansky. Sorry, I'm going to probably butcher that name a little bit. But he developed this idea back in the 90s. It's called the internal pressure to get answers, to resolve things quickly, and to avoid ambiguity at all costs. People high in need for closure tend to react intensely to uncertainty. They don't like loose ends. And when those loose ends show up in relationships, they feel threatened, maybe anxious or stuck in these whole obsessive loops. But needing closure isn't the same thing as needing healing. It's not the job of the person who ghosted you to provide either. When we over-identify with the narrative of harm, what we're often doing is outsourcing our emotional processing. We want someone else to come back and make the mess make sense. But the hard truth is that most of us and most of that healing happens when no one comes back. That's where the work begins. That's where someone like myself comes in to help you make sense of it. And you've got to work through the pain. And trust me, it's a lot of work because you're sitting in uncertainty. You're not getting the apology. You're not knowing the why. That's where people start to grow. It's where self-trust gets built. I do want to apologize today, guys. I'm a little bit under the weather, so if you might notice that I'm kind of a little blocked up. But I just wanted to get this out there at least. Now, what I was saying was, because when someone leaves without explanation and you stop needing that explanation to move on, you build some emotional strength. It's not detachment, it's not avoidance, it's purely strength. Ghosting, for all the conversation around it, is usually about someone trying to escape their own discomfort. It's a refusal to engage, yes, I agree there, but often not a calculated one. And that's where the difference between emotional injury and emotional violence becomes clear. One happens because two people were misaligned or afraid or whatever else. The other happens when power is intentionally used to destabilize or control. Most ghosting, well, the first one, yeah, painfully, yes, but it's not abusive. And the more we keep treating every hurtful exit like it's trauma, the more we dilute what actual trauma is. We confuse discomfort with danger. And we build a culture where fragility is reinforced, not challenged, which is what I'm actually doing today. As uncomfortable as this is going to be to sit with this. So, Chris, why does this hurt us so much in BDSM? Well, let's talk about why this kind of silence, this kind of ending, hurts so much more inside of our community, inside of our spaces. Because this is a space, the lifestyle is a space where people share parts of themselves that they often don't share anywhere else. Their desires, their fears, their fantasies, their control, surrender, trauma responses, their wounds. It all comes to the surface. Sometimes those things show up without warning. When we vet someone, we let someone in. When we allow them to access our body or mind under a power dynamic, it's not casual, it's deliberate, it's intimate. Even in short-term dynamics, that vulnerability carries weight. So when that person disappears, or they back out, or they pull away without closure, it lands harder than it might in a vanilla relationship. It can feel like it's being dropped in the middle of a free fall. All that openness, all that exposure suddenly is met with silence. Our mind starts to go wild. Was it something I did? Did I break a protocol? Did I say too much? Did I not say enough? Was I good enough to warrant a goodbye? That's the danger of vulnerability without internal anchoring. We forget that just because a connection felt intense or meaningful doesn't make it permanent, or worse, reciprocal. Someone might have shared space with you that was real and sincere and still choose not to continue. That doesn't mean they didn't value you, it just means the connection ended. And while that can be painful, it doesn't automatically mean some harm was done to you, right? In BDSM, we're taught that consent is everything, but we rarely talk about the withdrawal of consent and what that looks like outside of scenes. Ending a relationship, even unannounced, is still a form of consent. It's someone choosing not to engage, and that choice, even when poorly communicated, is still part of the framework we claim to value. Consent includes the right to step back, even silently. Now, that's going to be a hard truth, and I know some of you are going to raise the pitchforks, but that's okay, because we have to talk about this, especially when you've opened yourself up emotionally or sexually or even spiritually to someone. But it is the truth. And until we fully accept that, we'll keep mistaking discomfort of rejection for violation. And I want to be very, very clear here. Not all exits are cruel. Some are done out of fear. Some are done out of shame. And yes, some are done with carelessness. To retreat from something that was maybe too much. But many people are doing this because they're trying to protect themselves, to avoid an escalation. Not all silence is spite. Sometimes silence is someone trying to survive their own internal process. That's why this is so, really important to talk about in kink. Because we can't really claim to respect autonomy and only allow it when it feels good. Autonomy includes the right to walk away, to disconnect, to disappear, even when others are left hurting. It's not an ideal scenario, I agree, but it's real. And we have to stop confusing disappointment with betrayal every time we don't get the ending we imagined, we wanted, or we believe we're owed. And this kind of leads me towards this whole entitlement, attachment, and ghosting thing. Because we need to really talk about what sits underneath. A lot of the outrage we see around ghosting, and truly, that's entitlement. Not the loud, boastful kind. I'm talking about the subtle, emotional kind. The belief that because you opened up, because you shared yourself, because you made yourself vulnerable, someone owes you something in return. That something might be an explanation, a goodbye, maybe a debrief, a chance to process, but underneath, it's all a belief that your act of vulnerability obligates them to stay present until you feel resolved. And that's where things start to fracture. This is what's known as a psychological entitlement, a belief that your needs should be met simply because you feel them. There was another study done in 2004, and they found that people with higher entitlement were more likely to experience anger and interpersonal conflict when their expectations weren't met. They weren't necessarily narcissists, but you know what? They were often just as emotionally wired to believe that their feelings should carry weight for others than anyone else, that others should respond to them. That silence is unjust. Now bring that into the world of attachment. If you have an insecure attachment style, especially anxious attachment, you're already primed to seek reassurance, to chase after connection, to interpret withdrawal as abandonment. That makes ghosting feel catastrophic. Not just painful, but like proof that you're not enough. There was another paper these two researchers worked on rejection sensitivity. By the way, everything I'm talking about, I will link these papers in the episode description. But their work on rejection sensitivity shows that people who are highly sensitive to rejection often respond to even minor slights with strong emotional reactions, anxiety, aggression, obsessive rumination. In other words, the more you fear being left, the more any silence starts to feel like a personal attack. You just don't feel let down. You feel wronged. You feel violated, dismissed. And that creates a powerful emotional narrative. They ghosted me because I'm disposable. They knew I'd hurt and didn't care. But here's the problem with that. When entitlement and attachment wounding mix, we stop seeing people as autonomous beings. We turn them into extensions of our own emotional regulation. Their job becomes to fix what they didn't break and to stay longer than they want to, or to come back and ease our anxiety before they go. And if they didn't, we label them as toxic or worse. This isn't a blame game. It's not about shaming people for being anxious or struggling with abandonment. These patterns come from somewhere: childhood, trauma, past relationships. But part of being emotionally accountable is knowing the difference between my wound was activated and this person harmed me. And not everyone who leaves is running away from responsibility. Some are just not available to us. Some aren't equipped. Some, honestly, aren't even interested. And yes, some are selfish. But most are just people making choices. They're not villains escaping justice. The more we make ghosting into a moral failing, the more we trap ourselves in a loop. We need to feed our this whole incessant need to be right instead of our need to heal. We project our pain outward and tell ourselves that unless someone validates it, we can't let it go. But we can. We just have to start with the truth. Vulnerability doesn't obligate anyone. It's a gift. It's not a contract. So now, how do we talk about building our rejection resilience? So we understand if ghosting hurts, and it does. I'm not saying it doesn't. But if we're not always going to get closure, and we won't, then what's left? Well, good question. Resilience. And I don't mean the kind of hollow bounce-back slogans you see in self-help memes. I mean actual rejection resilience, the capacity to carry pain without collapsing under it, to be able to sit with unanswered questions without, with the disappointment, with the silence, and still move forward without needing someone else to come back and stitch the wound shut. Resilience doesn't mean not feeling. It means feeling and still choosing not to surrender your power to the person who walked away. You can grieve without needing their validation. You can hurt without making them the center of your healing. Right? There's two psychologists, Shan and Vogel, looked at this in 2016, and they found that people with low resilience and high rejection sensitivity reported significantly more psychological distress after early parental separation. It's not just the pain of being left that breaks people. It's the inability to regulate the pain. That's where the work is. Not trying to stop people from ghosting, but in making sure we don't crumble when they do. So how do we start? Well, first you got to start with the loop. The why me loop. The spiral that plays the tape over and over again. Why didn't they say goodbye? What did I do wrong? Was I not worth it? You need to pause that loop, to name it, then redirect. That's the beginning of reclaiming your mind from someone else's exit. Journaling helps. It's, not as a feel-good activity, but as a tool for clarity. Write out what you actually wanted from them, what you didn't get. Then ask, can I give myself some part of this now? Sometimes just identifying what you feel owed lets you reclaim some of your agency back. You can't make them explain themselves, but you can choose how you respond to the void that they left. And then you've got to move from blame to boundary. Instead of saying, they shouldn't have done this to me, say, well, you know what, this was painful, and I still get to choose what kind of space I hold for people moving forward. That shift doesn't erase the hurt, but it anchors it. It says to you, yourself, I'm still the one in charge of what happens next. And here's the real hard truth of this all. If your healing depends on someone else giving you closure, you've already handed them the final word on your story. Rejection resilience is taking back that word. It's saying they left, that matters, but it doesn't define me. I do. You're not broken because someone left. They're not the villain because they didn't explain why. I know that message cuts against a lot of the grain, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people that don't agree, and that's okay. But in our community that values communication and process, we want to get that from some people But sometimes the most radical form of healing is accepting silence without needing it to mean more than it does. So here's the challenge I want to leave you with today. Take a moment and reflect on where you might be holding out for emotional clarity from someone who's gone, someone who may never come back. Ask yourself, not what you want from them, but what you still believe you need in order to move on. And then ask, is that mine to give to myself now? Because autonomy cuts both ways. If we want the freedom to walk away from what doesn't serve us, we also have to accept that others have the right to do the same, even if it stings, even if it hurts, even if it leaves questions unanswered. So I'm going to leave you all with a question today. What would your healing look like if you stopped waiting for someone else to finish the conversation? Now, I know this is a lot, and there's going to be a lot of people this will resonate with. I really hope this answered the question I got asked that inspired this today. But no matter what, this is really about having a bigger discourse around this conversation and talking about it and feeling it. It's not going to be easy. And there's going to be still a lot of people that disagree, and that's okay. I'm not expecting to convince everybody. But you have to start asking yourself those inward questions, because if not, you are going to move from relationship to relationship with an expectation that no one can meet because you don't know how to heal. And that's never going to be on them. That will always be on you. I do want to ask if you all would, please, no matter where you follow me, if it's Spotify, YouTube, Apple, rate, like, subscribe to the show, rate me 5 stars. It keeps these conversations going. It allows other people to find these conversations to bring them some clarity, or share an episode with them, something that maybe sits with you well, that they may need to hear. That allows me to reach more people, and I'd really appreciate that, right? Especially if this stirred something inside of you. And honestly, if you disagree with me, good. Let's talk about it. I'm going to mention my book. I know I kind of say this all the time. I do have a book out there, Tangled Desires, the intersection between BDSM and psychology. It's wherever you can get your ebooks from. There's a print version. It is a little repetitive. It was my first book. You know what? It leans heavily into the psychology. I think I got like 90 references in there. It took me a long time. It's the first book I ever wrote. I edited it myself. Yep. It's not the greatest. I didn't write Homer. I understand that. It's not a work of, any intellectual design, and I'm okay with that. But I have a friend who always pushes me, and I appreciate that part. So, with that said, I do have some other things coming up. I'm finally getting some interviews lined up. We're going to put some people on blast. We're going to talk to them about some certain things. We're going to, I'm working on that. I'm not going to say who yet. I still got to apologize to Red Warrior. I do want to get her on the show. I'm going to try to coordinate here over the coming weeks and to see if I can lock in a time when she's not busy out traveling and educating the world on BDSM and leather and all things kink and otherwise. Relationships she talks a lot about. Cannot wait to sit down with her. But, let me know what you thought today. Challenge me. Agree. Let's keep the conversation moving forward. Until next time, everybody, be safe, stay kinky.